Namaste everyone. So, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this insightful session titled Message from the Microbes, Gut Health, Immunity, and the Power of Self Care. In today's fast paced world, we often overlook one of the most intelligent systems within us, that is our gut. Once dismissed as just a digestive organ, the gut is now being hailed as our second brain, housing trillions of microbes that profoundly influence our immunity, mood, metabolism, and overall health. This session isn't just about microbiology and nutrition, it's rather a conversation about balance between our body and mind, modern medicine and traditional wisdom, and most importantly, between what we consume and how we care for ourselves. Through this talk, we aim to decode what our gut is trying to tell us, how these microscopic allies shape our well being, and how simple self care choices can create ripple effects throughout a system. So before we dive into this fascinating world and discussion ahead, let me take a moment to introduce our esteemed speaker for today's session. So, our speaker is Dr. Kunal Desai, MD. So, Dr. Kunal is full-time clinician in the field of infectious diseases as a part of large multidisciplinary private group in Dayton, Ohio. After completing his medical school training in Surat, India, he moved to United States and completed his residency and fellowship training at Wright State University. In addition to providing infectious disease consultations at 4 different hospitals in Dayton area, Dr. Desai also serves as a medical director of employee health for Kettering Health Network and a director of antimicrobial stewardship program at Soin Medical Center. Dr. Desai has a special interest in research to assess impact of heartfulness meditation practice and has published a research study on heartfulness meditation and its effect in lowering stress levels and improvement of sleep quality. He lives with his wife, who also happens to be an infectious disease specialist, and 2 adorable children. So I take immense pleasure in warmly welcoming you, Dr. Kunal Desai.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay, for nice introduction. Happy to be here with you.
Pleasure is mine, Doctor. So as we get ahead with the session, firstly, I think it would be nice to have some discussion about what is gut health and why is it important.
So, being an infectious disease specialist and, doing that day in and day out, when I think of gut health, I think in context of the gut microbes, which is something that we are learning through research in last 10 to 15 years. There is a lot more research done in this area in last 10 to 15 years. And if I take you back in the history, all of us physicians, we take this Hippocratic oath, right? Now, he was a physician in 18th century, and one of his famous quote, or one of his famous um, intuitive statement was that all diseases start from the gut. And you would wonder why he would have said that. And I don't think scientifically we knew this, why he said it, until we started learning about this gut microbes with the research in last 20 years, I think. So now it's telling us that maintaining a normal homeostasis of the gut microbes is the key to most of the aspect of our health. That includes the lifestyle diseases that we see most often nowadays, including obesity, diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, dysregulated immune system, cancers that we see a high rates of cancers in this in last 10 to 20 years. All that is connected to this gut health. And because most common diseases that we face these days are lifestyle related disease, gut is considered an epigenetic gateway because we influence that with our environment, with our thoughts and actions, our emotions, as well as the diet, of course. So, if we look at it in a broader way, um, gut health from this perspective is one of the keys to maintaining good well being and good health. You are muted.
Thank you. Sorry about it. So that's interesting that you got the topic of how gut influences the thoughts, emotions, and how it's involved in this, epigenetically. So, speaking about thoughts and emotions, right, we think of brain. So, can you give us some, rather, some little explanation about how this gut and brain connection happens?
Yeah, so it's it's very interesting. In a mundane way, we often describe as a gut feeling, right? Another mundane example is when which we all have experienced. For example, if we have to, you know, um, give a talk or give a presentation or doing a session like something like this, and then when we are a little anxious, we feel some um, discomfort in our stomach. Isn't that very common, right? Um, my little one will, before he goes for his tennis tournament or tennis game, he would go to the bathroom 2 times. Something changes when we are anxious to our gut in a very mundane way. From scientific perspective, there is enough evidence that there is a clear concept that we now understand as a gut-brain axis. So many of the mental health challenges that we see, such as depression, anxiety, there is a connection to the gut microbe and gut microbes health. So I'll share this term which will be helpful for further conversation in this topic is something we call dysbiosis. When the gut homeostasis is disturbed, basically in the context of imbalance of healthy versus unhealthy microbes in the gut, we call it dysbiosis. And that's a subtle process. It's something that doesn't have to manifest with symptoms, but it's a very subtle process that happens. It's like behind the scenes. Now, that leads to some of these imbalance, and that also affects the brain. One example is, um, when we have this saying that, especially in married couple, man's happiness is through his gut. If you feed him something good, he's happy, right? Which in a literal way, it's like okay, but scientifically speaking, we know that about 80% of the serotonin is produced in the gut with the help of this healthy gut microbes. Uh, and so that's just an example that how there is an interaction between the healthier gut microbiome and how some of the hormonal balance that affects the happy hormones can affect somebody's mental health, mental well-being, their mood and emotions. And that is basically something that we describe in science as gut-brain axis. And that also has a role for stress hormones, such as your steroid. Uh, and it also influences the steroid hormone balances as well. because stress is one of the most common cause of dysbiosis. And that is also the precursor for many of the health problems that we see, including the mental health problems. But the underlying mechanism goes through this imbalance of the gut microbes.
Okay, so since you have opened up this topic of stress, before we enter into it, I know it's a little wide and broad thing to dive in. Before, I just wanted to ask you about the symptomatology which one would have to be aware of when one suffers with an unhealthy gut. So, what would that be?
That's a little tough question. So if I'm answering that from a very simple, purely a gut health perspective, right? There you would have symptoms of issues with digestion, um, issues with bowel movements, things like that. That's one of the scientific term we use in that context is something we call irritable bowel syndrome, which is um, which is still not fully understood. Um, but we know that it has a connection with the gut-brain axis because it also is associated with person's mental well-being as well. So that irritable bowel syndrome is a perfect example of something which would manifest as symptoms in somebody who is at some subtle level developing gut dysbiosis.
So, does this stress too impact on this, balance state of this negative and positive microbes in the gut?
Yes, stress is considered one of the most common cause. So so before we talk about the negative aspect of it, let me share something about what should be the case with the gut health, and in the context of what should be the inner environment of the microbes, which is considered fairly healthy. Now, it is something that starts from the birth. So we acquire. So first of all, as you rightly said in the introduction, that um, we technically have we technically have more microbial genes with us than human genes. So if there are a million human genes right now in each individual, there are about trillion microbial genes that we carry with us. That's one aspect. Second aspect is where are those microbes most common location for that in our body, and that is the gut, and that's why we are talking about the gut health in this context. Of course, they are on the skin, in the respiratory tract. The microbes are there as well, but the gut is the largest portion of it. So that's one aspect. The second aspect about this gut microbes, it's the balance between healthy microbes and at some extent unhealthy microbes. Whenever there is an imbalance, that's a problem. Now, there are two aspects. One is imbalance, and the second aspect is diversity. So even in agriculture, we talk about biodiversity, right? So it all starts with the birth, uh, with the extent of mother's uh, microbial diversity, which affects the infant as we grow older, the external environment, and our diet influences the structure of our individual gut microbes. But the key things is balance between unhealthy and healthy microbes, and second is diversity of those microbes. There are certain microbes, they all have different functions essentially. So the more the diversity, the better it is, the richer your gut microbe is. So that's the normal thing that we learn. As we get older, of course, the biodiversity in the gut, as well as The balance, because of the aging process and other disease processes, of course, changes, and it goes down with the age. So that's normal physiology. So anything that disturbs that, it's called, it causes a trouble. There are three main reasons for this. Number one is stress. Number two is non-judicious use of antimicrobials, and that also starts with where the food is grown. When things are used, when the food is grown, also the biodiversity in the land where the food is grown, that also impacts us. Um, and the third thing is, another most important thing is the diet. So those are the three things that influences this balance and diversity. So yes, the stress is a very important part of it as well, because stress releases stress hormones, which includes corticosteroids, steroid hormones, and that is has a negative impact on this gut microbiome.
That's interesting. And I see that you brought about the topic of food too, that while you were addressing that question. In comes this question in my mind that what are some top foods that you would support that would support a healthy gut?
So there are two aspects of it. One is, of course, there is this pre something that is you can't control, which is your environment and where you get the food from. That is something oftentimes we cannot control. But in regards to the diet, um, one is the number one thing that I have learned that influences this. There's a high fiber diet. Fibers is a food for this healthy microbes. And we often describe that as prebiotics. And of course, you can influence your diet in a way that you are actually taking some probiotics, which is usually something that is fermented. So, for example, in India, we have many of the South Indian food is fermented food. Um, for example, yogurt um, is fermented food, but they have their own limitations. That helps, but they have their own limitations. But these are the two aspects. One is something that is providing you some living microorganisms, which is a fermented food, such as yogurt or whatever we cook, which is fermented. And then second, which is probably more important, to keep that existing microbes healthy, because they themselves multiply as long as we feed them the right food. And that is a high fiber diet, which is your salads and other things in that nature. Um, I used to advise patients about mostly the yogurt, and in US we use kefir. Kefir is one of those fermented um, yogurt in one way. It's a commercial brand. But as I learned about this more, I have understood that the high fiber diet is the key, because if you look at some of the uh, cardiologists' recommendations in regards to heart health, they also start talking about high fiber diet. But the reason is influencing that um, high fiber diet with to the gut microbe is the reason why we have to do that.
Okay. So, like you said, over the last few years, these terms like prebiotics and probiotics have moved from research labs into our everyday conversations. And I think I too have been hearing pretty much of these terms recently from my friends and colleagues, like from yogurt labels to wellness blogs. So, but beyond the buzz, I think they play a truly foundational role in shaping our gut ecosystem, like you mentioned. So, doctor, can you help us understand what exactly these probiotics and prebiotics are and how they could contribute to our gut health and immunity?
So basically, prebiotic is food for these microorganisms, which is usually has to be rich in fibers. Um, so whatever which high fiber, which is usually vegetables, fruits. If we increase the portion of vegetables and fruits in our diet, that provides us that prebiotic rich food that we need. And probiotic to me has um, limited options from the food source. At least yogurt is one of the big ones. um, Fermented food is another one, but there are other probiotic, something that you can buy over the counter or buy from other sources, pharmacy sources, which is fine. But if you're looking for that, um, one of the aspects you have to keep in mind that it's not the number of organisms they would put it on those pills, but it's the diversity of the organisms. What different kind of organisms they have combined. That is one thing to look out for when you are buying some of those probiotics. Is my simple suggestion. Because as I said, diversity is the key. It's not the numbers.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, diversity truly is a key, like you said. And yeah, in the world full of health trends and supplements, I think it's often the simple, consistent habits that usually make the biggest difference. And especially when it comes to gut health, I feel it's really important to carry such habits. And from how we eat to how we manage stress, like you have been mentioning about the impact of stress and also the food in our gut health, right? So our daily routines silently shape our internal ecosystem. So I just wanted to ask, what are some simple, practical daily habits that one can adapt to maintain a healthy and balanced gut?
Well, um, of course, uh, there are two aspects of it. One is to me is um, stress management and um, anything that influences your state of mind, your mental well-being. Look at it this way. um, we know that somebody who has chronic stress, they're more likely to consume high carb or carbohydrate rich food. So we know that from studies that they are more likely um, to ingest unhealthy food, and then it becomes a vicious cycle. For example, if we ask somebody and say you should do a moderate exercise, but if their state of mind, their mental well-being is not there in the mood to exercise, it becomes a burden and they won't be able to do it. So I think the first aspect is to um, figure out ways to develop a good mental well-being. And the second aspect, the diet aspect, we already talked about. Um, but to me, it starts with this: a balanced state of mind can easily lead to balanced diet. And then it feeds on each other. Then it becomes a good vicious cycle to move on to the healthy lifestyle. So to me, we it's like this: anything starts with the thoughts and feelings, and that leads to action. So if we somehow regulate our thoughts and feelings, it's easier for us to take the right action with the right understanding. So other information is obviously there for anybody in these days. Information gathering is not an issue. Its implementation is a challenge for many of us. So to me, simple meditation practices uh, is to me is a first start to help regulate the mind, and then everything else falls into the place.
That's that's very interesting that you brought silently there the aspect of meditation and its importance. So, like like you see in recent times, these practices like meditation are being linked not just to the mental peace, but also to physical health, including the gut function. And it's fascinating how the mind and gut seems to be in constant resonance. So, in your experience, so does meditation help the gut feel better or function more smoothly?
Definitely. And um, you know, I think so. Let's think from a little outside the box. We are saying that we live with this millions of microbes, and they obviously resonate with our feelings and emotions. Mundane example would be depends on my state of mind and my inner balance. I have seen our kids behave differently, and we all have. I'm sure we all have witnessed that our loved ones behave differently when we are in the good state of mind, right? So, and that is outside of us. And imagine that when we are in poised and balanced state of mind, all the cells, including these microbes within us, they also resonate with the same frequency. And I'm sure there is a positive influence because of that. Now, there are some studies done, um, at least I'm aware of few studies which were done um, on vegan vegetarian diet along with meditation practices, and they measured the impact on the gut microbes to see if there is a positive influence or negative influence. And some of these limited studies have found a very positive impact on it. But these are not easy study to do because gut microbes are influenced by so many factors, environment, including diet, so many other things. So you have to control those confounding factors, but these studies have shown positive impact. That's from scientific perspective. Um, the second example that I can give you that I witnessed during COVID times. Um, and it was I was in a unique position because this was something that came right at us from my field of infectious diseases. And second, I serve as a medical director for employee health, so there was a lot of direct interactions with healthcare workers during those few years when we had this pandemic. One of the observations that I had was that a person who was stressed when they acquired this viral infection, they had much different and worse clinical course. They were much sicker, um, and and then somebody who accepted it and dealt with it in a different state of mind, in a more calmer state of mind, their outcome was different. Now, I used to wonder why, right? And then I discovered there are studies done where we found that somebody with a good or better gut microbial homeostasis, they did much better with COVID infection than others. Now remember, there's no single drug that ever worked for this viral infection. This was basically the disease outcome depended on primarily how individuals' immune system responded to the virus. There was a one single determining factor. Um, and somebody who's had a pre-existing gut dysbiosis, not having a healthy gut microbiome, their immune system responded in a very dysregulated way. Because we know from research the virus presented itself to the gut. So now you can see from this simple observation, if we have a disease process where we encounter with a different state of mind, where we are balanced, when we are calm, the disease process is different compared to when we get anxious and stressed. So meditation, uh, with a simple practice of meditation, you can see how your response changes to any disease process. And this was like a, you have a large sample size to see this during that time. But I hope that answers your question in regards to how meditation can influence this, because we know that with these examples, we know that meditation practices can influence our immune response, and gut microbe is the key to understand how that happens.
Yes, it certainly does. Thanks for answering that. And I think that was such a powerful reminder how a state of mind can directly influence the state of health. As you rightly pointed out there about the COVID, during the COVID period, those who stayed calm and centered often fared better than those caught in stress and panic, right? So it's a clear reflection of how deeply interconnected our emotional resilience and immune system truly are. Thanks for pointing it out, Dr. Kunal. And so, by this, I think we come to the end of this insightful session. And any closing remarks that you want to give for us, so now to in future keep up with the gut health and thereby our mental well-being too.
No, I think we covered most of it. Um, One last thought I had was, um, we need to remember that, as I said earlier, the gut is the epigenetic gateway for human health. Genetics that we come with through our parents and other things, but the most important aspect is epigenetics that we can influence with our own habits and lifestyle. And in this current times, um, managing our stress, daily stresses and strains and emotions with a simple uh, heart-based meditation practice can do wonders if it is applied in a right way, and we can influence that epigenetics. And that reminds me of this conversation that revered Daji had. Daji described with revered Babuji in a Heartfulness tradition, that um, he was he was he was he was told that uh, Babuji essentially implied that these practices will influence human genetics. And I always wondered how, but if we look at it from this perspective, how this simple practices, it changes our state of mind, state of being, it essentially influences the epigenetics for an individual, and that changes the health and well-being.
Thanks for sharing that. This, I think, deeply reinforces the importance of not just what we eat, but how we feel and also live each day. And I think how we take a life day by day. So I think how we lead it is important as such. And so as we come to the close of the session, I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank our wonderful speaker for such an engaging and enlightening talk. Thank you, Dr. Kunal Desai, and your clarity, depth, and practical wisdom have truly helped us look at the gut health from a whole new perspective, not just as a medical concept, but as a daily relationship with ourselves. So, to our audience, thank you for your attentive presence and thoughtful participation. And your engagement is what made this session interactive too. And let's remember that our gut speaks in whispers. And the more we tune in conscious eating, mindful habits, and self care, the more vibrant and resilient our health becomes. So stay curious, stay kind to your body, and let the microbes work their magic. Thank you once again, and have a healthy, happy day ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you.